Hey everyone, welcome to Pulling Threads if you're tuning in on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. And if you are part of my very special group in my Facebook Women Navigating Divorce group, welcome to you as well. This podcast episode is really made for you. I think it's a very important discussion, so I'm going to be sharing it on those other places as well. Today we're going to talk about why women, and it could be men, stay in marriages or relationships that they no longer feel comfortable or safe in and that they know are essentially over. Many women who I speak with stay not months longer than they want to, but years. This episode is discussing the why. Have you ever wondered why women stay in marriages? If you're contemplating leaving, the love is gone, or worse, the marriage could be harming you. Today we're going to pull the thread on the obvious reasons, and we're also going to talk about the hidden ones that most people don't consider when they see someone miserable in marriage. Now, I am doing a lot of divorce coaching these days, but I'm also doing discernment counseling. In this episode, we're going to talk about the marriages that are essentially over, where one person has decided maybe long ago that it was over, and they no longer have interest in repairing, but they haven't left yet. This is for people who know they want to leave, or maybe people who waited too long and just they're in their feelings about that. If you are in that situation, you know that leaving is not just about walking away. It's about untangling a lot of trauma, facing a lot of fear. Let's talk about the cultural story. Society loves to oversimplify. She's weak, she doesn't know her worth, she's staying for the money. Those are the easy answers, but they're wrong. And they're cruel if you're the person who wants to leave and has chosen to stay. This narrative keeps women silent because no one wants to be seen as weak and the one who stayed in a miserable, sometimes abusive situation. What if staying isn't a weakness, but a survival? Sometimes confronting the cultural judgment is too much, and we can't leave. We can't face the judgment. Women remain silent about abuse because they believe they can't leave. Instead of sharing what's happening and getting help from friends, family, therapists, they stay silent in abusive situations because the shame around staying is equally as bad as the shame around leaving and becoming a divorcee. So there is cultural judgment any which way. That judgment keeps people in abusive situations longer, having them isolate themselves and remain silent. Even if someone expresses that they're unhappily married, sharing the abuse they are enduring, especially if it's emotional abuse, is too much. They're just not going to share because people don't get it. And they're probably often told, just leave. If you're not happy, just leave. It's not that simple. Sometimes you can't leave. Now, there are obvious reasons why people stay. Finances, children, cultural expectations that you won't get divorced, your reputation, fear of conflict, fear of losing your other family that you gained in the marriage, fear of losing friends. As a divorce coach, I've sat across women who can't imagine how to survive financially on their own. Many of those women had incredible careers before getting married, but when it came time to make a decision whether to put their children with a childcare provider or stay home, they chose to stay home. A few years of doing that, it's really hard to re-enter the workforce at the same earning level that you had before. As a therapist and a coach, I've heard, I don't want to break my kids' hearts. I don't want to fail my family. I don't want to be judged. These are all reasons to stay. And on paper, these reasons make sense. But underneath, there's more going on. For example, when I was making a decision to leave, I experienced some level of shame from someone who was providing emotional therapy and support. It wasn't intentional, but that person said to me, I know you like your lifestyle and you don't want to lose your lifestyle, but you're miserable and it's time to go. And you're lonely and it's time to go. And it could be better on the other side. All of those things were true. Even the fact that I didn't want to lose my lifestyle. But at that point in time, losing my lifestyle was the least of my worries. And with that particular person in my life, it was always the thing they said was holding me back. And I felt an incredible amount of shame for that. I thought, I don't feel seen or heard. I was worried about my children and their future and my financial stability. And I'll get to why that was so important and how it was so much deeper than lifestyle when we talk about trauma in a minute. But just having one person say that to me did keep me there longer until I reached a point where it became part of the reason to go, to prove I'm not worried about my lifestyle anymore. I'm worried about my mental health, my happiness, and the well-being of my kids because they can see that I'm unhappy and unfulfilled in this relationship. It's just not always as simple as it looks. Being the person who's supporting someone going through it is difficult. Being the person going through it is difficult. We need to remember it's never easy. Never. Leaving is hard. One reason that they are hard is something called trauma bonds, which many people know now what they are, but let's talk about them. A psychologist that I really respect, Dr. Ramani, really explains this well. A trauma bond is when love is mixed with abuse or neglect, and the brain ties the pain to the attachment. The cycle of idealization, devaluation, and occasional reward creates a psychological addiction and a physiological response. For example, every time he apologizes or shows tenderness, dopamine floods the brain. The nervous system learns, stay close, maybe you'll get the reward again. This is intermittent reinforcement and wires the belief that leaving equals danger, even when staying can be the real danger. Many people do not realize the level of craving someone feels when there's a trauma bond. Even the people going through it do not understand it. They may despise this person for what has happened in their relationship. But there is still a longing when there's separation. And there's often a kind of mean, nice cycle. They seek out interaction or engagement with the person, hoping they get a nice response. The mean hurts, but when there's a pause and there's nothing, they realize if I engage with the person 5 times, 1 out of 5 times, the person might show love me and I'll get a dopamine hit. So it really is very much like an addiction and can feel like craving something you're addicted to. That unfortunately keeps many people in relationships much longer than they would like to stay. She's not crazy for staying. Her nervous system is doing exactly what it's trained to do, which is survive. I've had multiple clients who are in this addictive cycle, and it's really hard to recognize when you're experiencing it, and it's really hard to break a trauma bond. Many people are in a relationship have a trauma bond, but they are so full of shame for staying that they're not going to tell anybody. If you tell someone that you're craving the man you're divorcing, they will think you're crazy unless they've experienced this type of bond and addictive nature in a relationship. It's really hard to understand it. This isn't addictive like new love in the honeymoon phase. This is like someone you do not like anymore. You do not want to be in a relationship or married to them. When there's long periods of separation, you start craving them. It's a complete mind fuck, honestly. Like, it is so hard to wrap your head around and much harder to get out of. So another thing that keeps many people in an unhappy relationship is religious trauma and conditioning. For women, religion adds a whole layer. Messages like marriage is forever, divorce is sin, submit to your husband create so much shame around leaving. Even when abuse is present, women may feel that leaving equals spiritual failure. Religious trauma often silences women and men. It traps them between loyalty to their faith and loyalty to themselves. Many women find themselves foregoing their own needs and authenticity due to shame from their religion and culture. So when God is framed as the reason to stay, leaving can feel like betraying both your faith and your family. Let's face it, most of us are part of a religion because of our family, and we feel like we're going to let them down. And that certainly keeps people a lot longer. The fear of going to hell, I grew up for my first 8 years in the Catholic Church, and the fear of going to hell and the visual representation of burning in hell, if you've grown up in that particular religion, sinning, it's just very deeply programmed in you that if you divorce, you're going to be committing adultery. Now, for me, when I grew up, annulment wasn't really a thing. Now it's a different process, and I'm no longer a part of the Catholic Church. When my parents were divorced, we were no longer allowed to go back to our church. That was part of our community. And my sister and I just happened to be almost ready to go through kind of a ceremony to celebrate going through catechism. We were not allowed to do that. We were never allowed to go up to the front of the church and have our communion. Not because of anything we did as little girls, but because our parents were getting a divorce. The beliefs that you form about yourself when you're told you no longer belong in your church, there's just no way to describe the shame that I personally felt at that time. That played a role in me no longer being a part of that church, but it also played a role in me staying in relationships that weren't necessarily the best for me. The shame around divorce was huge. Probably one of the biggest things that I dealt with in my divorce, and many women and men deal with, is the fear of loneliness and the stigma of being alone. Research shows that loneliness lights up the same pain centers in the brain as physical pain. The fear of being alone isn't just emotional, it's neurological. Add in cultural stigma, the divorced woman, the single mom. For many, the ideal of that label is just unbearable for ourselves and for our children. Our culture romanticizes marriage and demonizes divorce. Women are taught to be unhappily married, rather than be alone. The fear of being alone is placed upon us. The fear of loneliness can feel bigger than the fear of abuse, and I can attest to that. My fear of loneliness is off the charts. It sometimes presents as a fear I won't meet someone else or I won't have someone in my life, but it's seriously the fear of being alone. Now, in reality, I like being alone sometimes, but the fear of being alone is huge. It's scary. And that certainly kept me in my marriage longer than I would like to admit. The fear of being alone and having your spouse be with someone else. It's huge. I can attest to, and I have multiple clients that have told me, they've stayed just because they were so afraid of how bad it would feel to see their spouse with someone else. It was like the fear of the pain, even though they didn't really want to be in the marriage anymore. So the next thing we'll talk about is identity collapse. Like, let's say after 20 years as someone's wife, who are you when you leave? Identity collapse is when we don't know who we're going to be. If our identity is wrapped up in being someone's wife, I was a doctor's wife and I didn't like that. I didn't like that identity ever. I was never comfortable with that. But many people are. They're happy being a tandem. They want to be a couple. When people talk about Mary and Gary, they're talking about two people together. Who is Mary if she's no longer with Gary? That's huge. Another issue is learned helplessness. After years of being dismissed and controlled in an abusive marriage, women stop believing they're capable of rebuilding. They see themselves as weak, not only for staying, but given the message they were given from their spouse. Rebuilding seems impossible, like a mountain you just can't climb. And then there's hope, the most unexpected tether of all. Hope that he will change, that love will return, and that things will be better. Many of us stay because we think if we wait a little longer, maybe they'll turn back into the person we married, the person we fell in love with, or maybe agree to go to therapy. Something will be better. I heard someone say, it's like playing a slot machine. You keep pulling, thinking that you're going to get the big reward and that the person's going to change. One of these times you're going to pull that handle, and when they're going to do all the things you wanted them to do, they're not going to be abusive anymore, or they're not going to leave you alone anymore. What often happens is, instead of getting the big reward, which is the spouse that you want and maybe even the spouse that you married to return or agree to go to therapy, instead you get little bits, right? You get a few coins when you pull and pull. And somebody 5 chairs over, they just hit the jackpot. The longer you stay, the more you've invested, the longer you want to keep trying. When in reality, many times people ultimately end up leaving and realizing that no matter how much they did, no matter how much they tried, it was never going to work. So you wish you had left earlier. Hope can be a lifeline, but it can also be a trap. Hope keeps us there long enough for the other person to come back around, because that certainly does happen. People can change if they want to. People can mend a broken marriage if they want to. The Gottmans have a 75% success rate. So if both people want it, there is so much hope. It's knowing that the other person doesn't want to do the work, and there's no way that your needs are ever going to be met. Then another reason people stay It's the bleak dating landscape. And here's a modern reason women hesitate to leave. The dating world looks bad. So many women tell me all these men cheat, all these men lie, the dating apps are full of players and they're miserable. It's impossible to find commitment anymore. Apps reward short attention spans and constant novelty. People breadcrumb, ghost, they juggle multiple partners, or they avoid labels altogether. There's also the rise of situationships, where intimacy exists without commitment, which works for some people and not others. For women, leaving a long marriage can feel unsafe or degrading to go out into this dating landscape. It's hard to say what's better or worse. The narrative women hear from other women is that it's brutal out there, and better the devil you know than the devil you don't. The fear of the unknown future keeps just as many women stuck as the fear of the present marriage. But here's the truth. Yes, the dating landscape has shifted, but it's not all hopeless. Healing yourself first means you date from strength. That's what you want, not fear. And that changes everything. That was my experience. I worked on myself for about 4 years, 2 while I was married, 2 while we were separated and in the divorce process. I'll be honest, by the time our papers were signed, so when I entered the dating world, I had this incredible long period of healing and working on myself. And so I was able to recognize a few things. I recognized that, in fact, security and the need for security was part of my trauma from growing up without financial security or stability, and a lot of fear around not having enough resources, and definitely didn't want that for my kids. But I also, in my healing process, realized that I was capable of having that security on my own. I had a huge fear of abandonment because of my early childhood trauma around men. Prior to doing the work on myself and healing and building up the strength, I really didn't allow myself to be loved and to fully love. 4 years of healing, therapy, lots of different types of therapy, mindfulness training, and going through the divorce, recognizing so many things about myself during the divorce process and codependency. By the time divorce papers were signed, I loved myself and knew myself really well. I had an immense amount of awareness and strength. Coming into the dating world was weird and all new because when I got married, there were no dating apps. So there was a sense of excitement of getting on the dating apps, and then a sense of, oh, this is really bleak and crazy. But it didn't take me long to meet someone who clicked, probably because I wrote out my manifestation list of what I was looking for. I really felt like I had the ability to really love. If I were giving advice to women who are contemplating leaving, I would say working on yourself is going to give you not only the strength to get through the divorce process, but also the self-love that you need in order to be successful in the dating market. So if you're worried about meeting someone else, the best thing you could do would be to get yourself physically and mentally in the place you want to be and the place you would want someone else to be if you were meeting them. When I met my partner now, it wasn't long after the divorce process was over. That worked for me because I had been essentially separated for 2 years, and the last 2 years of our marriage, we weren't together a lot. He was living in a separate place. I had been doing all that work in preparation, and I think that was really huge and made entering the dating world successful. I only went on 5 or 6 dates before I met Frank. The dating pool is weird, and there is a lot of adjusting to that. When a woman finally leaves, if this is what she truly wants, if there is no other option, it's rarely one thing that gets her to that point. It's a tipping point. That's the day the cost of staying outweighs the fear of leaving. Sometimes it's one last betrayal. Sometimes it's a child noticing the tension and asking why you stay, or if you could leave. Sometimes it's a woman's body breaking down under the stress. The Gottman Institute shows us that contempt is the kiss of death for marriages. And for many women, when contempt becomes the air they breathe, something inside finally shifts. And it's like a switch flips, and there's no turning it back on. The moment of leaving isn't about courage, it's about survival, rebirth, and finally remembering who you are and what you want in this life and what's most important. So if you ever wondered why women stay, remember, it's not stupidity, it's not weakness, it's trauma, culture, fear, and hope, all tangled together. If you're in this place, know this: leaving is possible, healing is possible, and you're certainly not alone. These are all ways we stay and reasons we stay, but in the next episode, I want to talk more about what to do if these things are keeping you in and you truly want to go and you know it's time. Take care. Sending you lots of love and light. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe, and there will be many more talking about similar subjects. Talk to you soon.